Okay, a couple of things. I know that this is all like photos and whatnot. You can't actually see my anxiety, but I'm actually very, very uncomfortable doing this review. So, a couple of things. First, this is going to be a very, very general review. Partly because, cards on the table, I did not care very much for this movie, but I like the Angry Video Game Nerd. I like James Rolfe a great deal, and he did such hard work on this. So I don't want to go on about negativity for all that long. Also, the movie just came out for download, so I'd like to give people a chance to see the film and draw their own conclusions, not just have it in the back of their minds what I say. The second thing is that I'm only giving my thoughts on this movie because people have asked me about it. I would have been a lot happier to do this had I liked the movie, but giving a negative review to a project that someone I like and admire worked on so hard is not something that I would have planned. I think in a case like that, it is the most tactful thing to do to be silent. I also do not want to approach this review as whatever kind of a film critic that I'm deemed as being. I would much prefer to simply just give my thoughts on the film and not say this is right, this is wrong, this is the way it should have been done, and this is crap. I know that I am a very small-time personality and that the Angry Video Game Nerd is one of the most well-known internet personalities out there, and so I know the Angry Video Game Nerd doesn't need defending. I know that James Rolfe his work doesn't need to be handled with kid gloves and this and that and the other thing, but this is just a personal thing for me. I don't think that criticizing the work of somebody who does something even remotely similar to what I do is in good form. So I'm going to review this film, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about it as Confused Matthew. I am going to talk about it as myself. So for better or for worse, here it is. So I think, as is the case with a lot of people out there, the Angry Video Game Nerd was the first internet personality that I ever discovered, and he's still a favorite to this day. His reviews are well executed and well timed. He perfectly blends genuine review with this fully realized character who has developed almost his own universe that he lives in. And James Rolfe himself is just a hell of a talented individual and a hell of a nice guy. So basically, I'm a fan, and I have been since the beginning. For the record, my favorite review so far was the Tiger Games. Not only was it hilarious and touched on a subject that maybe many of us knew about but didn't quite realize at the time, but it was such a well-paced review. He combined his thoughts on the games with his own personal experiences and used other characters in a way that was just perfectly timed throughout the review. It truly is an impeccable video, and if you haven't seen it, you should. But truth be told, I like just about all of his videos, and I've become fond of this character that he has created over time. So yeah, I'm a fan. And when I heard that James was making a movie around this character, I thought it was a pretty neat idea. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm just jumping at the chance to criticize. I love James's work, and I would never wish to speak ill of anything that he does. But unfortunately, all I can do is give you my own genuine experience of the film, and I must sadly and honestly report that I just didn't like this one very much. I think there were a few problems that I had watching this one. Some I think that are maybe slightly objective, but a lot I think are my own personal tastes and expectations, so take this review for what it is. I think one problem has to do with what I have come to call the 11-minute curse, and let me explain by my usual story that seems off topic, but will soon seem relevant. I am a big fan of SpongeBob SquarePants. So when I heard they were doing a movie for SpongeBob SquarePants, I was like, kick ass. This is going to be great. But then when I saw the movie, I was amused for a little while, and then I was just like, eh. I'm also a big fan of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Then I heard they were doing a movie and was really excited, and I saw it and was amused for a few minutes, and then I was also like, eh. So what happened here? Both those films were made by the original creators, and technically speaking, they were very well done. So why didn't I like those movies very much? It occurred to me that these were films made by writers who are used to doing short 11-minute cartoons, and both of these intellectual properties were designed to be short in the first place. The humor is designed to be short. and it always seems to me that writers, even good ones, have a difficult time taking something that was intended to be brief and extending it into a full-length story. And that is what I think happened with the Angry Video Game Nerd movie. Here's the plot. The Angry Video Game Nerd is approached by a game publisher to review E.T. 2, a sequel to the Atari classic that all of the Nerd's fans have wanted him to review for years. James then recalls the myth about all the cartridges being buried in the New Mexico desert and vows that if they can dig them up, he'll review the game. This begins a road trip plot that segues into a plot involving the military chasing them down and trying to capture them. They eventually learn that a Dr. Zandor, a former Area 51 employee, designed the game to be an exact replica of Area 51 in order to exact revenge on the government for kidnapping and holding hostage an alien that he was attempting to free. So the nerd and his companions get roped into this conspiracy plot while still trying to track down the rumored E.T. games that were dumped into the landfill. Now there is a lot more to it than that, but this is just a general summary. But if you haven't seen the movie yet, you may have stumbled onto one of my biggest problems with the film. What this movie is about doesn't really have a whole hell of a lot to do with the Angry Video Game Nerd. Most of the plot is an almost generic story of alien incarcerations and conspiracy theories. It's clearly making a lot of callbacks to B-movies and the like, but the problem I kept coming back to is just how unrelated it all seemed to the nerd character himself. He almost takes a backseat to the other characters numerous times. Moreover, there is a stunning amount of exposition and setup in this film that all pays off just a bit too late. The middle in particular tends to drag as it almost struggles with where it wants to go. So the plot itself was a bit of a hang-up for me personally. I was expecting to see more things like when James is put into the real-life video game when he attempts to enter the Doctor's house. That scene harkened back to the established character for me. The Angry Video Game Nerd is a fantasy himself, and I just don't understand the decision to keep him rooted in such mundane actions so often in the film. But strangely enough, one of my biggest problems with this film harkens back to one of the criticisms James made of Ninja Turtles 3, where they had their pick of some of the most familiar characters in that whole series, but chose to use generic villains that no one knows or cares about. Truth be told, I have never personally been a big fan of the side skits James does with the nerd character. I tend to skip over those moments, like when he's fighting with the Zapper or beating up the Joker, that kind of thing. That isn't a slight against James either. All of those segments were well executed, well written, and fun. This is just my own personal taste. I've always been more interested in his own genuine reactions to the games he plays because they're so just spot on and rooted in his own personal experience. So I suppose that fact itself may have been a barrier for me approaching this movie in the first place, but just taking a step back from my own personal tastes, some of the best moments with the Angry Video Game Nerd character are with him interacting with other characters, like Spider-Man or Bugs Bunny or the Cowardly Lion. They add their own perspective on their roles in these games and on the nerd character himself, and it shows the character getting personally into their world. But in this movie, we don't get to see him interacting with characters of that sort. In this movie, we get to see him interacting with that guy and that girl. Now, don't get me wrong, these two did a great job in the movie, but who are they? And why leave all the already established characters at home? And I know a lot of that was probably due to limitations involving the rights. James couldn't even secure the rights to feature the actual E.T. game. He had to use a generic version of his own. And that is no fault of his at all. He can't control that. But even stepping outside of the owned characters he's interacted with, there are also numerous other characters that he made himself, all of which appear absent, or at the very least, barely featured. For example, the big-ass boss at the end of the movie is a robot creature named Mwalzik? I can't even pronounce that. It's this big giant robot dude. Now, this whole scene was pretty fun to watch, but I just kept thinking, why isn't this the Death Christ? That is a well-known character from James's large body of work. My best guess off the top of my head is that maybe James didn't want to offend a wider audience, and I can totally understand that if that's the case, but I would have loved to have seen that character be the final obstacle in the end. And I mean, what about the bullshit man? What about Bored James? It was nice to see a cameo of Kyle Justin, and that song he did was great, but it seems to me like it would have been more beneficial for an angry video game nerd movie to use actual established characters and personalities rather than making new ones from scratch. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad James didn't just make this movie nothing but AVGN references and tried to make it its own thing, but I would have preferred just a bit more balance. It didn't actually come across to me as much of an angry video game nerd movie at all. It seemed kind of like a generic sci-fi conspiracy movie with the angry video game nerd character plugged into it. I did see a few nods to his general body of work, but I actually picked up on more nods to other movies, which was kind of strange. Now, on some level, you have to appreciate the fact that James Rolfe made the movie he wanted to make, and there was clearly a lot of passion that went into the film. It wasn't a badly made film at all. It was just like watching air being let out of a balloon at times. I don't understand why he would choose to center the film around precisely nothing that made us love this character in the first place. Alien conspiracies and the military chasing the nerd through New Mexico are about the last thing that come to my mind when I think of the angry video game nerd. Now, there is a lot of creativity to the story. The conspiracy itself of one of the programmers making a secret blueprint for Area 51 inside the game, and then it turns out that Area 51 is the game, that's genuinely clever. I just don't really see the connection between this story and the angry video game nerd. I honestly feel like you could replace that character with any other character and nothing would really change in this film. The best part of this experience for me was at the end when he actually did the E.T. review, but like I said, I've always liked his reviews more than the character stuff anyway, so honestly, maybe I'm just not the best person to ask about this. Some people have felt that putting that character in the midst of what was at the time the greatest gaming legend in history was a perfect fit for the character, and that's a perfectly valid opinion as well. My voice is just one among many, and there are plenty out there who I'm sure will enjoy this film. It's already done very well for itself in its limited release, the fan reception has just been incredible, and I expect that the DVD and Blu-ray sales will do very well as well. James put a lot of genuine effort into this project, and regardless of my own personal feelings, I'm a fan. I admire his work and creativity, and I'm happy to see him do well. So from the bottom of my heart, a big congratulations to James and to all the people who made this movie happen. And in the 1 in 100 billion chance that James actually watches this review, I would say this to him. James, I'm a big fan, and I appreciate the hard work and effort that you put into this film and into all the videos that you have done over the last decade. As a filmmaker, you can never expect to please everyone. No matter what you do, there will always be some jerk who thinks the movie should have been something else. But I, for one, am happy to see that the positive reception to your movie is far overshadowing the negatives. I'm sorry that I didn't like your movie, but honestly, this isn't even about me. It's about the film you wanted to make and that clearly the fans were happy to see. My own thoughts and feelings are but a tiny drop in the much larger bucket of your film's success. My advice is, pay it no mind and just focus on the positives. You worked hard on this, and you deserve it. So thank you for all of your hard work, and I wish you all the best.